Hi, today I'm going to describe to you a situation that I call the achiever's trap. So if you find yourself in a situation where your stress levels have been high over a period of time and right now you feel stuck, overstressing, overthinking everything and feeling overwhelmed a lot of the time, and maybe you've even tried some other treatments, other approaches, other techniques in order to try and change your situation, but nothing seems to work. You still find yourself stuck, overstressing, overthinking, overwhelmed a lot of the time. So I'm hoping the information I'm going to share today is going to shed some light on this whole situation. The achiever's trap is normally a combination of two things. We're normally looking at a specific personality type along with certain life experiences. So the personality type that I recognize myself, put myself in the same group, as I said, and pretty much everyone who comes along looking to work with me, we're normally looking at intelligent, creative, ambitious people, usually quite analytical, lots of activity in the mind, very busy mind, perfectionist pattern in place, and usually relatively sensitive in nature. So maybe you recognize some of those qualities or traits. I know I do. And it's interesting when people come along inquiring about the work and I explain the whole achiever's trap and we talk about personality traits. I usually list all of those personality traits: intelligent, creative, ambitious, analytical, perfectionist pattern, busy mind, sensitive in nature. Most people, or pretty much everybody, says yes, tick, 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 yes to all of the above. So maybe you recognize some of those traits or tendencies. So what are the signs that what signs can we look out for that might tell us that we're stuck in this achiever's trap? So we could call them signs or call them symptoms, and the signs or symptoms usually fall into one of three categories: either physical, psychological, or emotional symptoms. Okay, so on the physical symptoms, we could be looking at things like, very common, problems with sleep. Yeah, you might find it hard getting off to sleep, or more common, you might find that you're okay, you're exhausted, you fall asleep at night, and then you wake again in the early hours of the morning, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and the mind gets really active. Everything feels completely out of proportion, thinking about all of your potential worries or challenges, and then maybe you stay awake, stressing in that way for, another 2 hours or 3 hours, only to finally fall asleep and then wake again exhausted in the morning. Yeah, that's very common. So we've got sleep problems. Also, another physical sign or symptom are increased levels of pain, maybe headaches, migraines, neck pain, shoulder pain, back pain, hip pain, knee pain. That's very common when our system has been under stress for a long time, increased pain levels. Another area on the physical side is energy levels. Yeah, problems with our energy levels. Maybe you're low energy all of the time, you just feel tired all of the time, or maybe you've got fluctuating energy levels. Maybe you're fine sometimes, but maybe the energy just drops away completely. Or maybe you find yourself in the situation where you make it through the week, you push and push and push, and you make it through the week, only to feel completely exhausted and spend the whole weekend trying to recoup your energy in order to go back into battle, go back to work on Monday morning. So maybe you're experiencing issues with your energy levels. Some other things are very common, is just tension in the body, just feeling that sort of tired and wired feeling in the body. Along with other things like digestive issues. There's a whole range of physical symptoms that are associated with elevated stress levels. And the second area is the psychological side of things. When our system has been under stress for some time, we're basically in a low-level fight or flight response. And so at a subconscious level, our system will be feeling very vigilant, on the lookout for danger. So that will have an impact in two ways on our thoughts. It will impact the quantity of thoughts. The quantity of thoughts will increase dramatically. You might notice this. The mind is constantly busy, jumping from one thing to another. And it will also change the quality of our thoughts. So some examples, maybe you notice a lot of what if thoughts coming up for you. What if this happens? What if that doesn't happen? What if it turns out that way? What if he does this or she doesn't do that? And those what if thoughts are often accompanied by or followed by an internal scary movie of quite how badly things might turn out. That's very common, what if thoughts. Another area would be internal conversations. You know, the way that we have these internal conversations with people who aren't actually there at the time, imaginary conversations. Maybe it's a point that you want to express to someone, or you know there's a situation coming up where you're going to have a conversation with someone. So you start rehearsing it ahead of time. That's very common. Or maybe going over past conversations and thinking about what you could have said, or what you should have said, or what you might have said. Another area is judgments. When we've been under a lot of stress, the judgments tend to increase. So maybe that's judgments around other people and other things and other situations. Or it could be a lot of self-judgment. Yeah, judging the way that we've operated in a certain situation, or certain choices that we've made, creating a lot of inner conflict. The third area are the emotional signs or symptoms. You might find yourself feeling much more emotionally susceptible. You might find yourself reacting much more strongly in situations, and when you do, it's much harder to get back to that point of balance. And maybe it takes you, quite a while to get to a point of balance again, only to find yourself reeling into the next emotionally charged situation. So emotional vulnerability, that's another sign of an overly stressed system. Very often when people come along looking for help, maybe they find they're in the situation, they're overstressing, overthinking, overwhelmed. Typically, they'll be pointing to recent events. Yeah. Oh, it's this problem I have in my relationship, or oh, it's this, my boss, is giving me a really hard time at work, or I've got this increased workload, or I've got this family problem, or maybe a problem with one of my kids, or whatever. And although those things are additional stressors, once we start to look at the whole situation and dig a little bit deeper, very often this situation has been building over a long period of time. Those things are triggers. Those recent events are other triggers, but the whole pathway has been building over a long period of time, often over a lifetime. So when we look at the way that these achiever patterns can develop, so let's just imagine, before I share this, I'm just going to describe one way that the achiever pattern could have formed, in our early years. This might be different for you. It might be different, there's many different ways that this can happen, but I'm just going to use one example today. And so when we're looking at this whole story of how this develops, maybe it's more beneficial to look for the similarities rather than look for the differences. Because what we're trying to do is just look at this overarching theme. Yeah. So let's imagine that you find yourself in a family situation, and you've come along into that, you've been born into that family situation with all of the personality traits that we've just described. And maybe you were born into a family situation and it's quite busy. Maybe there are other siblings, other brothers and sisters. Maybe one or both of your parents are relatively stressed or anxious. And because of your personality traits, at quite a young age, you probably became quite proficient at a lot of things. Yeah, you might have become known as the good girl, yeah, or the good boy. Oh, Rebecca, yeah, she's a good girl. Yeah, she can do X, Y, Z. She's really good. And you might have had praise for those things that you were able to do. Maybe you were given a lot of responsibility at a young age, and quite soon you might have started to notice, and this might not have been a conscious thought. You might have just noticed, they're happy when I do these things, when I achieve these things. And then the same at school. Maybe you tried really hard at school. Maybe you were, one of the top of the class, trying really hard, getting a lot of praise from the teachers. And the same at home, whenever you achieved some stuff at school, maybe you realized you got the attention, yeah, and the recognition and the appreciation that you were longing for. And so we very soon learn that that's part of the way that we get what we need. So we start pushing ourselves to it, to continually achieve things, and that same pattern could then normalize. That's just the way that we start to approach everything, yeah, putting our all into everything. And so time passes by. You go through education, into higher education, maybe into university, pushing yourself really hard again to get those grades. And then maybe straight out of university into a job, maybe into corporate somewhere, somewhere in corporate, and again pushing ourselves, achieving all sorts of great things, maybe having some impressive promotions, maybe even getting to, a leadership level or senior leadership level. And then maybe alongside that, maybe you've then, you met a partner, you met someone, they became your partner, and then over time, maybe you had a child, maybe you had another child, and all of the time through this whole process, the stress levels have been creeping up, yeah, consistently creeping up. And as you've gone through, into a job, as I said, maybe into a position of leadership or even senior leadership, the responsibilities are increasing all of the time. And the same at home. You might find yourself in a position where you're managing people and projects all day at work, and then you're going home to more of the same, because you might find that you are the manager in the home. Yeah, so responsibilities have increased massively over time, and these stress levels have been increasing, but you've acclimatized, and as an achiever you've probably also got relatively high levels of stamina. Yeah, you can push yourself and push yourself forward, and constantly pushing up this stress response, and we're kind of setting up at this point all of those responsibilities increasing, those stress levels increasing. It's like the conditions are forming for the perfect storm. Yeah. So if we imagine our stress levels, if we think of like a pressure gauge, yeah, over time the needle has moved up and it's kind of in the red. Yeah, that the needle is in the red. There's high levels of stress in the system all of the time. If that had happened overnight, you'd notice it. But because it's happened over all of those years and all of those increases of responsibility, and maybe along the way, other life events happened. Yeah, maybe we experience other things like bereavement or illness in the family, or maybe one of your children is more challenging. Maybe problems in the relationship, all of these things pushing the stress levels up all of the time. But we acclimatize and we get used to living in survival mode, basically, operating under this low level stress response all of the time. Now, the problem here at this point, we said the needle is up near the red. The system, it's amazing what the system can put up with. The system is acclimatized to being in high levels of stress all of the time. But what that does, it leaves us in a situation where there isn't much margin for error. Yeah, there isn't much margin for anything else to happen. yeah, because the needle is up in the red. We're kind of at our limit already. So this is the situation that leads to the achiever's trap that we're going to talk about in a moment. And maybe you recognize some of this, you know, we go back to childhood, somehow learnt to operate in that way, to be the achiever, did that through our whole education, into work life, more and more responsibilities, more and more promotions, got a partner, created a family, more and more responsibilities at home, all the time pushing this needle up into the red. So in the next section, we're going to look at the tipping point and why people get so stuck in this situation. So now we get to the tipping point. And the tipping point can come about for many, many different reasons. It could be that the stress has just increased, and it's just become unbearable, and the system tips over, it goes over the edge. Yeah. Or we said that at this point the system is vulnerable because there's no margin. Yeah, the system is highly stressed. So maybe some other life event comes along. Maybe there is a relationship issue or a breakup, or maybe there's a problem at work, or maybe a massive project that you're trying to complete. Another common one is a physical thing, something like a virus. Maybe you catch a virus and never really recover. Yeah, because that's another physical stressor. So it could be an emotional or psychological or physical additional stressor that comes along. And because the system is so highly stressed already, it just hasn't got any capacity. So it's like the system crashes. This is how people, we could describe that as burnout. Yeah. So when the system sort of tips over the edge. And now at this point, we mentioned all of the achiever traits, yeah, that can help us to achieve all sorts of amazing things: intelligent, creative, ambitious, analytical, perfectionist pattern, busy mind, sensitive nature. A lot of those traits have probably helped you to achieve all sorts of great things. Yeah. To do really well through your education, do really well through your career, create a really good lifestyle for yourself. And so up to that point, they were constructive. They helped. Yeah, they helped you achieve all sorts of great things. But once we reach this tipping point, those traits or qualities can tip from being constructive to destructive. Yeah, when we go into total overanalyzing everything, overthinking everything, feeling totally oversensitive. So those achiever traits that have helped us to achieve all sorts of great things can now start to dig us deeper and deeper into this achiever's trap. Yeah, because things have gone way out of balance at this point. The other sticking point here, yeah, is all of those symptoms that we mentioned earlier, the physical, emotional, and psychological symptoms, they all start to drive more and more stress. Yeah, so the sleep problems, the increased pain, the problems with energy levels, the overthink, the what if thoughts, the internal conversations, the emotional sensitivity, and the way that our emotional reactions are increased. All of those symptoms start driving more and more and more stress, setting up what I call a self-fueling cycle. A self-fueling cycle. Internally, yeah, the way that we think, when our system is in survival mode, subconsciously we recognize that we're under some sort of threat, so we become more vigilant. And that's why the quality of the thoughts will change. And as we start running our mind in that way, in a very stressful way, what we're actually doing through neural plasticity, each time we're having one of those stressful types of thoughts, we're reinforcing these neural connections, and therefore these neural networks start to run more and more efficiently. So that's another part of the achiever's trap. So this tipping point where all of the achiever qualities tip and go from being constructive to destructive, that, along with the symptoms of stress, physical, psychological, emotional, all start driving more and more stress. That's what locks us into the achiever's trap. Yeah? So maybe this is resonating for you. Maybe you're having some light bulb moments at this point. This is what I deal with all of the time with the stressed out and burnt out achievers, hundreds of achievers that I've worked with over the last 20 years. So that is the achiever's trap. So now at this point, the cycle that I'm describing has become so efficient. We said all of the symptoms are starting to drive more stress. All of the achiever qualities that have helped you achieve all sorts of great things have gone from being constructive to destructive. And now we're locked into this self-fueling cycle. So at this point, you might reach out and try and get some help with this, or try different techniques or approaches. Maybe you try things like yoga, meditation, mindfulness. Maybe you try some other treatments. Maybe you try some therapy, some counseling. Maybe you try physical exercise. And I want to make it clear, I'm not putting any of those things down. All of those things can be helpful in the right situation. But in this situation, in my understanding and my experience, this has become so efficient, those things are just not enough. There's gaps in the approach. Yeah, we have to approach this using a combination of tools in order to see any positive change, in order to reprogram and reset the mind and the emotions. So if you have tried various things and you haven't got the changes that you're looking for, what this can do is reinforce the belief that maybe nothing's going to change. Maybe I'm different. Yeah, maybe it's because my parents were like that. Maybe I'm broken. So if you are at that point, I want to share with you, you're not broken. Things have got way out of balance, and then they've got stuck there. They've even sort of become almost wired in place, but you're not broken. We've proven that time after time after time. So many of the clients that I work with come along saying that they've tried pretty much everything else. Yeah, and that's when we have to really get down to basics and use a combination of methods in order to retrain the brain and the emotions into a healthier, more balanced state. And that's what we're going to look at next. So let's just imagine you had a different problem. Let's say you'd become very overweight and very unfit. We all know that there would be, if you were prepared to commit to it, there would be a set of steps that we could put in place. Let's say you went along to an expert personal trainer. They would look at a few different areas. They'd look at what you're consuming. They'd look at your output. And hopefully they'd look at the emotional and psychological side of why you'd got to that point. And a set of steps would be put in place. And if you were prepared to follow those steps consistently, you probably wouldn't have to do it perfectly, but generally follow that guidance, positive change would be inevitable. You'd lose weight, and you'd improve your fitness and increase your stamina. And if you carried on over time, the results would get better and better. Well, the same is true for the mind and the emotions. We need to look at this, that the mind and the emotions have got into an unhealthy state and got stuck there. So in exactly the same way, what we found are there's a set of techniques, tools and strategies that we can put together in a system and follow that system in order to dial down the stress levels And when we do, we're reducing our stress, preventing burnout, and we're developing real, lasting resilience. But what that needs is the right methods in the right combination at the right time. So if you're interested in this unique combined approach at reducing stress, preventing burnout, and building some lasting resilience, then I'll leave a link down in the description box where you can find more information. If you're serious and you're interested in taking part in the program, I'll leave another link in the description box where you can book some time in my calendar. I offer a free strategy session. That's where you and I can get together over a call, and I can hear about your specific situation, and I can tell you exactly how it would look to take part in the program, and between us we can decide whether that will be the right thing for you right now. So with all that being said, thank you for staying to the end of the video, and hopefully I'll catch up with you again in some way very soon.